Good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop for Tuesday, July 5th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 60 days, the game against Michigan in 144 days. It has been quite a week in the college football world as the conference realignment carousel started spinning again in a very big way. One of the teams at the center of seemingly any conversation about conference realignment right now is Notre Dame. Fighting Irish have been more or less able to maintain their independent status outside of the 2020 COVID year in the ACC, but they are always seemingly near the top of the wish list when Big Ten or ACC fans talk about potentially expanding the league again. Now, with UCLA and USC coming to the Big Ten and the possibility rising of the SEC and Big Ten turning into two mega conferences, the Irish could be a big piece of sorting out what the future of college football might look like. So, today, we're going to be talking about the Irish. We're actually going to do a regular season preview episode on them about a week from now. But today, my guest is Fernando Ramirez. He is the host of the Pot of Gold podcast and the Notre Dame beat writer for the South Bend Tribune. Fernando, thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Tom. It's funny because Notre Dame's kind of right now on the beach, relaxing on vacation. They got their feet up. USC, UCLA start to do some moves, and everybody starts talking about Notre Dame. Notre Dame's like, "Wait, what? I'm on vacation. Like, what? Why are you guys talking about me?" So it was pretty funny to see uh, that basically USC, UCLA decided to go to the Big Ten. And now everybody's asking, "Well, what's up with Notre Dame?" And Notre Dame's kind of just relaxing and not really. They didn't know they were going to be in the spotlight, but they did announce they will be wearing their green jerseys this year. That was a bit of news yesterday that they had that they're going to be wearing their green jerseys against Cal. So that was the pretty funny part that they actually did come out and say something, but it was just about them wearing their green jerseys for the first time since 2018.
Yeah, this is a time we set this up earlier this week. We were planning on just talking about the 2022 Irish, and we'll work a little ahead. It'll be great. This is supposed to be the slow time of year, and then the college football world blows up on Thursday. So a whole lot definitely has happened the last few days since we initially set this up. So before we get too deep into what could happen in the future, I wanted to just kind of start and let you explain a little bit about how Notre Dame's current agreement with the ACC is structured right now.
So basically, in football, they're just allowed to they they're obviously kind of a part of the ACC, but they kind of roam around. They play Ohio State. That's one of their main rival. Well, not main rival, but like Ohio State's one of the teams that they're playing right now. They're gonna obviously they had a tradition with Michigan for years, and they kind of roam around and play different teams. So it's just interesting to see the dynamic. I don't. There's no anybody else in football who has that kind of agreement who can basically do whatever they want. But right now I think that's the way they're structured to play, and they could even pull out of the ACC and do whatever basically that they want for other sports as well. So I it's interesting to see what the future kind of holds for Notre Dame and see what they could do. Just don't know when a decision could be made or anything like that. So it's just interesting to see and like I said, UCLA and USC decided to make some noise, and everybody's now looking at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's kind of like just relaxing. I'd be interested to see if they do anything. I don't think they'll do anything this offseason, but I am interested to see kind of will they keep their status as a kind of a roaming organization, or will they decide to jump in and maybe become a part of a conference?
Well, you mentioned the other sports being in the ACC there. They're in the ACC for most of the Olympic sports, men's and women's basketball, and all the other sports that they have, soccer and all that kind of stuff. Those are all ACC teams. They play in the Big Ten in hockey, but in football, it's just they have a schedule. It's not they're not a member of the conference. They were in 2020 for that weird COVID season. But other than that, they sort of have a scheduling arrangement where they'll just sort of play a certain number of ACC teams a year. But in football, they're willing to have basketball be an ACC team, and they were in the Big East before that. So, the independent thing is not something that they necessarily care about for a lot of the other sports, but it has always sort of been a core piece of that Notre Dame football identity, the concept of independence. What is it about independence that is so appealing to Notre Dame, other than just the fact that they've always done it and that's how it's always been?
I don't know if I feel like it's just that they want to be that independent, the team that kind of stands out and wants to be kind of on kind of wants to be the team that doesn't have to be here or there, and I think they like that. They like that they're able to have different choices. They're able to roam around a little bit. So I kind of feel like they like to be unique, and that's kind of what makes Notre Dame stand out. So I feel like that's what they kind of like. They like to be unique. They like to be different. They want to be the team that kind of can do basically whatever they want. They don't they can play different teams. They can do different things. So I just don't see I see them liking that, and the way they kind of run their team is like that they're a unique school. They have unique traditions. They're different from the Clemsons, the Alabamas, all that stuff. So I feel like that's kind of this kind of just brings it to a whole nother level of their uniqueness.
A lot of these conversations, it feels like, I guess, let's start with this. It feels like there are three possible choices here for Notre Dame. You stay independent like they are, you move to the ACC full time, or you move to the Big Ten full time. It doesn't, I mean, theoretically, they could go to the Pac 12 or the Big 12 or the SEC. Those don't seem likely for a couple of different reasons, it feels like at this point. So we're really talking independence, ACC, Big Ten. The ACC they have a grant of rights agreement through 2036, and that's a term that we've used a bunch recently when talking about conference realignment. Essentially, it just says all the TV revenue goes to the league, and if you leave before then, you don't get any of that TV revenue. With Notre Dame, that only applies to their ACC member sports. So their basketball TV revenue or their soccer TV revenue or whatever other sports, that's what's tied in the grant of rights. It does not apply to football for Notre Dame. So that's not necessarily something that would be a deal breaker. If they left, you might be willing to punt the little bit of basketball TV revenue if you couldn't get out of that contract for what could be a bigger payday from another conference. But that is something that does tie into the Irish to the ACC. But I mean, outside of that, like, what if the ACC is trying to make the case right now for why Notre Dame should join a conference and should join the ACC? What is the case? It doesn't feel like there's a particularly strong case that the ACC can make right now in terms of, I mean, the ACC is probably not making as much money as the SEC, Big Ten. That seems pretty much like a foregone conclusion. What kind of case can the ACC make? Because it feels like the ACC needs Notre Dame very badly right now, and I don't know that there's any reason why Notre Dame would need the ACC.
I completely agree with that. I feel like Notre Dame it draws eyeballs everywhere, and it's funny because when I started at the South Bend Tribune, um, one of somebody showed me kind of the map of where Notre Dame fans are. Man, I saw fans in Australia, fans in England. I mean, it's just they have so many fans all over the world, and especially in the United States, there's Notre Dame fans everywhere. I'm in San Diego for a little bit, and the other day I was at a Padres game, and I saw numerous Notre Dame hats just walking around. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, their fans are literally all over the country, and like you said, the ACC needs Notre Dame because of all the eyeballs that it draws. It doesn't matter who Notre Dame plays; fans are wanting to watch. They're going to tune in on Saturdays to see who they're going to play, how they do. They just have this aura about them. And you're completely right. The ACC needs Notre Dame because of all the eyeballs that it gets. So literally, whoever is able to get Notre Dame, they're going to get more eyeballs on the whatever conference, obviously. But I completely agree with that. I feel like the ACC needs Notre Dame because of the aura, because of how big it is, because of all the different eyeballs that it can get. But I mean, you get a Clemson Notre Dame game, it blows up. You get Michigan against Notre Dame, it blows. Like, Ohio State and Notre Dame are kicking it off. Obviously, that game is going to have so many viewers. That's why they put it on the college game day, and college game day is going to be out there because they know that not only Ohio State's going to draw, but Notre Dame's going to draw a lot of fans also. So yeah, the ACC really does need Notre Dame to stay. But for Notre Dame, I mean, they're just looking at it, in my opinion, kind of like, oh, I mean, we can stay here, help them out in a sense, but they can basically do whatever they want, and I just don't, like you said, I just don't feel like necessarily Notre Dame needs to stay there. They can go anywhere and make more money and be able to do a lot of that because of how many fans and because of how big they are and how everybody knows the four leaf clover. Everybody knows how big the Irish are all over the country, and they know that no matter what, they're going to have a strong team almost every single year.
And there are, I think the case for joining the Big Ten is a lot cleaner and simpler on a couple different fronts. I mean, first of all, there are a lot of historical rivalries there. You talked about the Michigan rivalry; that was an annual thing for a long, long, long time. But they've also played Purdue a whole lot, and virtually every year, it seems like they play Purdue. They play Michigan State a lot. When they play Ohio State, those are some of the biggest eyeball games. Those are two of the biggest TV attractions of any program in the country. They don't play very often, so it's a big event when they do. Those games always get monster numbers. So you've got some history there.
And they haven't even beaten Ohio State.
Yeah, they haven't beaten Ohio
Yeah.
State since the 1930s. They've played 4 times since then, and the Buckeyes have won all of them twice in the 1990s, in the early 2000s, and then in the 2015 season. But you know, you've got all this historical rivalries. It's a pretty easy fit in terms of travel for non-rev sports that, you can get the field hockey team and just put them on a bus to Purdue, or put them on a bus to Bloomington, or put them on a bus to Columbus, or wherever you're not necessarily flying down to Miami. So, I mean, you've got some logistical stuff that's easier if you're going to join the Big Ten. There's also just a big old Brinks truck with a B1G logo on it that they can drive to South Bend that the ACC just can't really seem to match right now. It feels to me like independence and joining the Big Ten are probably the top two most likely scenarios there. Joining the ACC as a full-fledged football member seems like that's maybe the third most likely, given some of these scenarios we're talking about and some of these factors we're talking about. Would you agree with that? Is that, or do you think the ACC maybe has a closer case to the Big Ten than I'm giving them credit for?
No, I completely agree with you. I just feel like, I mean, you look at it, they play Indiana, Rutgers, Maryland, like everything's so close in a sense. Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, like Northwestern, everything is so close to Notre Dame that it just makes sense. But in all reality, I kind of think it's you keep your independence, Big Ten, fat gap, then ACC. And I think I saw a little while ago that it's from Heather Dinich from college football. She said a source told me that if Notre Dame were to withdraw from the ACC, it can play football wherever it wants. It would have to pay exit fee and grant of rights, like you said, fees for its other sports. So I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire, I guess. So maybe Notre Dame has been considering this, and it'll be interesting to kind of see. But I think that you hit the nail on the head. The Big Ten just seems like it's a more plausible place because of the how close everything is, and the rivalries. I mean, Michigan State Notre Dame would be fun to watch. Penn State Notre Dame, like some of these games would be so much fun to watch. And of course, you bring back Michigan and Notre Dame, and that would just be a huge game. So and then the way Ohio State has really kind of revived itself the last couple of years, where I mean they've won the championship, and I think it was 15, and obviously they've been title contenders ever since. So it definitely would be a lot of fun to see them in there. But I just think independence right now is kind of what they're looking at. I mean, I've been wrong before, but I definitely feel like they're gonna try and keep their independence as of right now.
Yeah, it feels like this is a very easy thing to be wrong about in some form or another, whether it's the timetable stuff is going to happen on or who's going to end up where. There are a lot of moving parts right now. Notre Dame is probably going to be one of the most important of those moving parts moving forward. So I'm glad we got a chance to kind of talk through some of this stuff right now. We're going to have Fernando on in about a week or so to do the traditional season preview segment, previewing the Ohio State Notre Dame game. But for now, Fernando, let people know where they can find you on Twitter and where they can read your work and find your podcast.
Oh yeah, thank you. It's at Real F Ramirez on Twitter, Instagram. I'm trying to get my TikTok game up, so I'm gonna try and do more on that. You can also find my stuff at ND Notre Dame, obviously ndinsider.com. You can find the podcast there, and obviously you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, all that stuff. It's called Pot of Gold. We have some great guests. My co-host and I, Mike Barandino. He does some great work also for the Indie Insider. So check out our work there. And again, thank you so much, Tom, for having me on.
Well, definitely do give Fernando a follow on all of those social media platforms. And I would recommend subscribing to the Pot of Gold podcast. I did that myself after listening to a couple episodes. Seems like that's going to be a team that Ohio State fans are going to have a lot of interest in following over the course of the summer, heading into that big game on Labor Day week. So thanks again to Fernando. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.